What? Who? Where?
Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having
Welcome
me
to the
so much.
program. Yes, Ben, co-host and lead editor of Cinema Gulp. Wow, it's so good that you're here.
It's great to be here. I appreciate it. I did it.
Yes, I love how you say that.
Some get it right,
Well,
some don't.
Ben, I want to start off today's program by learning more about you. Do you have a background in theater and or the entertainment field?
I do. Well, it's funny. My theater background goes all the way back to my freshman year of high school. I immediately felt I never wanted to be an actor. I was way too nervous for that stuff. But I love theater tech, and I did mostly stage managing all the way up until my senior year. So I did lots of like musicals, plays, talent shows, the dance shows, things like that. So I learned that stuff back in high school, and then I did a couple. It wasn't summer stock, but it was the level right below summer stock. I got to work on some stuff for the summer right after I graduated high school. So I did some. I didn't get too high up into it, but the stuff that I did was really fun.
It sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
What are some of your influences in the entertainment and in arts?
Oh boy. Well, like everything always stems back to writing for me. I mean, I know I'm an editor and that's what my degree was in, but like writing is where because that's the first thing you can do because you can't edit when you're a little kid. I mean, maybe you can now, but when you couldn't when I was a kid. So like writing was huge for me. Like William Burroughs, Charles Bukowski, Joseph Conrad, especially dark stuff. Yeah, in the kind of like material, like I love James L. Brooks. I wrote and submitted 2 film reviews to a contest back in high school, and that got me the opportunity to get coached on screenwriting by the great Mark Andros, who at the time I believe his most famous screenplay to date was Late for Dinner. But a couple years later, obviously, he would be Oscar nominated for the screenplay for As Good as It Gets. That was an amazing experience. I love like Tom DeSillo films. They're like these weird oddball slice of life films with no real story. And if for filmmakers, if you haven't seen Living in Oblivion, you have to go see that movie right now. But those are some of them. They don't, the ones that stem back real far is obviously like Frank Capra and Fritz Lang, because you watch those things and you go, wow, they started everything. So.
Mm-hmm. Recently, I watched some films on the Criterion channel, and they had some features made by Robert Downey Sr.
Yeah.
And his movies are that kind of, just the direction of the film is very off, but it's meant to be jarring and incredibly creative. And I understand what you mean. It is fun to watch something like that and get inspired by it. So.
Yeah, I think this guy that I love that doesn't do a lot anymore, I always have trouble with his last name. He came and did a lecture when I was back in college. His name is Todd Soldalis. He did Welcome to the Dollhouse, which is a really strange movie, and a movie called Storytelling, which is a very controversial movie. No real plots to these movies, but just genius in their own sort of quirky way.
I mean, there certainly is something to be said for experimentation in film, and I love it too. So it is interesting to talk about that, and we definitely have to touch on that even more another time. You made a documentary. What was your mindset behind these projects?
Technically, I was what Rob likes to refer to as a predator on a documentary. I was the producer editor. It was shot by someone who actually went out and lived with these homeless street performers in Salt Lake City. So he came to me with the footage, not knowing what kind of story to make out of it. So he gave me a lot of like storytelling type of credit to it, because he just had, 6 months worth of footage and he didn't know what to do with it. So we spent 2008 to 2011 just restructuring this documentary so many times. It really wasn't even about street performers at first. So to answer your question, my mindset was I just got out of film school. Now I need to work on a project and stay sharp. That was pretty much, I just said, I'll take on anything.
Wow. Well, that's a very ambitious project, what you described. And, we certainly want to check your projects out for sure. Can you tell me about...
of it right here.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Can you tell us about your YouTube channels, websites, or places where we can find you or buy any work that you make?
Some of my shorts, some of the stuff I'm most proud of, like being able to do a commercial for Cirque du Soleil, which was really
Oh,
cool.
wow. Mhm.
That was about 4 years ago. I need more work from you guys. But that stuff, and then I actually was able to do a lot of cinematographer reels of surf photographers and surf videographers who would send me their stuff, and I would make reels for their galleries, so they would have these big montages playing in the center of their gallery, and that stuff was so much fun and so rewarding to do that stuff. Cinema Gulp, I mean, hopefully everybody go check out that channel. But there's such a back catalog of it because we started it 5.5 years ago, and it just started out like actual crap. I mean, like most of them do, directionless, knowing we want to talk about movies. Me and my partner John, like, we grew up together, we went to high school together, we were writing films together, and for so long we wanted to do something like this, and then oh, okay, well, there is a platform for this, so let's start doing not the same thing but something similar. And yeah, we just started doing it. And honestly, there's stuff in the Cinema Gulp channel that's so far backlogged. And I was working on a web reality show called Late Nights, and there's 4 episodes on it. If you go to the very bottom of like the Cinema Gulp archive, you'll see I did this web-based reality TV show on this like late night delivery service called Midnight Munchies, and it was really wacky.
Throughout Newport Beach, Costa Mesa, and Huntington Beach, the company is Midnight Munchies, and these are the Late Nights.
Them delivering food and alcohol to drunk people at 2 in the morning. We had people, we had the car cam, and I'm really proud of that. It was a lot of fun. It was actually my brother's company that he started. So, but yeah, Cinema Gulp, right now we're just trying to create new shows. We really want to get back into our little studio. We've been doing Zoom or StreamYard for seems like a year now. But we have so much more fun when we do like location shoots, and we do reviews in the woods or something, just for the hell of it. So we want to get back to that stuff. But I hope that answers your question. Like, the show that I love, that I'm most proud of, is called Film and Vinyl. And I know that a couple of the people in our chats seem to dig it. And that's where I break down how a film was made, but simultaneously how the soundtrack came to be, like from the ground up, like who was hired to create a soundtrack, who did they hire, what was this process, things like that. And there's some interesting ones with like The Crow and the Royal Tenenbaums. So yeah.
Fairly recently, I saw a preview of Dune, and in the preview, the director Villeneuve was talking to Hans Zimmer. And he kind of joked around and told Hans something like, well, I figured you'd be busy, so you wouldn't be able to do the soundtrack for Dune. And Hans Zimmer was like, no, I'm available. I'm available for this one.
I want to know why Roger Deakins did not shoot that movie. I do not understand. I mean, there had to have been a scheduling conflict, but come on.
And can you tell me about your interest in records, and do you have a vinyl collection?
Yeah, it's actually right there. I just can't turn the camera to show it. It's pretty big. I started it in college. I went to college in Chicago at Columbia College Chicago, a great film school. And I lived in Logan Square, and I would take the Blue Line train home every day from campus, and I would always stop off in Wicker Park. And if anybody remembers High Fidelity, the whole movie's basically sent in Wicker Park. And Championship Vinyl was basically Reckless Records, which is where I went. And that's where I first developed that love for it. And it was 2005. I know hasn't been a lifelong thing, but it's been just the sounds and like just walking in and hearing what's playing. And then as soon as you lift something up, it starts a conversation with someone who sees it in their peripheral. I just like fell in love with that whole lifestyle. And like me and 4 of my friends, that's what every year for our birthdays, we all give each other records. And so yeah, my collection's pretty big, and it's kind of all over the place as far as genre goes.
It sounds like an incredible collection, and I love that film Fidelity. Is that with Catherine Zeta-Jones and John Cusack?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Jack Black, who's awesome in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Catherine Zeta-Jones, but I think it's fantastic that you collect vinyl, and I think that there's a lot of PGS members who love vinyl, and there's definitely something about it that is appealing, and I think it's great. It's a cool collection.
I always recommend a vinyl from my collection that I feel pairs with the movie. I don't
Wow.
actually choose the actual soundtrack that I'm talking about. I just pick one that kind of is sort of like a companion piece to the movie.
That's very interesting too, trying to find something that you feel would be suitable or can set the right tone, also for your viewing pleasure. So when did you become a fan of Alien, and what exactly made you love it?
That's such a great question. Well, I saw Aliens first, which I'm guessing probably a lot of people my age did, because I was 2 when Alien came out, dating myself. Um, it's when I finally saw it, it was in the 90s. It wasn't even in the 80s. It was, I want to say it was like early 1990, 1991 that I finally saw Alien on VHS. And what I loved about it was that, because somebody goes, "Oh, dude, it's boring. It's like the first movie of Aliens, but it's boring." And I get where they're coming from, because it's not Aliens. But I loved the contrast when it comes to tone. They're both amazing, enjoyable films, but for super different reasons. Whereas Alien is so about build up and tension and atmosphere. And like, I think for a lot of like horror directors, guys like Brad Anderson, who make quiet, subtle, like Session 9 type horror movies, everyone takes from Alien and goes like, how do we build atmosphere, quiet atmosphere? And that's what the imagination starts getting you scared, So that's my Alien story. It freaked me the hell out when I was probably about 13.
Yeah, I totally relate to what you said, and I think that there is something to be said for the movie maker that can pace the entire audience and pace the story, to build up that suspense so that it feels natural and not rushed and terrifying. So I think that Alien definitely accomplishes that. So can we talk about your love of classic cinema? Because I've noticed that you've sent in letters to Robservations that talk about classic films. For example, you recently sent in a letter about a film called Fury. So can you tell us a little bit about your passion for classic cinema?
I would be lying if I said like I watched it as a kid. I mean, I saw stuff like Casablanca as a kid and It's a Wonderful Life as a kid. For me, it was falling in love with these movies in film school and being taught the fundamentals while you're watching these, and respecting how they're made and the fact that they could be the first of their kind. And the reason I love It Happened One Night and His Girl Friday so much is because they're like the first rom-coms ever made. And that may seem sour to say, but rom-coms originally were really great, and sometimes they still can be. And I do think It Happened One Night, the structure of that movie is the formula for every single romantic comedy, even if the story isn't exactly the same. But then, like, on the flip side, when we started learning foreign cinema, that's where I really got influenced by a lot of the stuff. Like Andrzej Wajda, like he did like the trilogy of war from like the 1950s. It's called like A Generation, Canal, which was my favorite, and then Ashes and Diamonds. Like that guy's work was stellar. And like in the 50s, it's so gritty and just grimy and like frightening, and it's just like so ahead of its time, that trilogy of movies. It's a Polish director, Andrzej Wajda, who's just phenomenal and just pushed all kinds of boundaries back then. So that's what I love about it. I love watching the fundamentals. And obviously Frank Capra, he's like the slice of life guy. Like his stuff feels so grand, but it's really just like simple stories.
Yeah, and I certainly do agree with you with It Happened One Night. And I know it was, is it Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert?
Claudette Colbert, yeah.
And I just love her. I think she's such a brilliant actress, and she's, sort of would always sort of do these, perhaps not in It Happened One Night, but in other films, like she would sort of make these sly remarks, like she would say things that would be very funny to me. I remember one time her saying something like, haven't you ever heard of a campaign promise? Sort of like having a laugh at, when someone promises you something and you don't know them, but it was just very funny, her delivery, especially.
Always, yeah. And so sparky and sassy, and It Happens One Night too, because that movie is two equals going back and forth in a world that at the time was not an equal playground at all, but it never felt that way. It really didn't, and like that's why it felt like a Henry James novel where it's like it's so long ago, but like all the emotions are the same,
Yes. And who could forget that famous scene where she kind of pulls up her skirt to stop a car, and of course, she's using pure sex appeal for this. And I mean, I think even that, I don't remember what year the film was made, but even then, like, it was considered very racy, but certainly, she had the upper hand there. So I really liked that.
And it's such a cool history lesson, like everything about the walls of Jericho, like why are you putting a blanket up between these two beds? And like that metaphor of like breaking the wall down at the end and not seeing either of the characters for the last 2-minute long shot and just seeing that blanket come down. And like it's a total history lesson, because kids now will be like, or even me, like what is the significance of this,
Right. And I have another question. What heavy metal album would you take with you if you could only take one to, like, let's say, a deserted island or on a trip? If you could only take one, what would be your choice?
Okay. So first, I thought maybe Slayer, Seasons of the Abyss. But then I said there's no way anything can beat Tool Undertow to take with me.
Wow.
I just don't think there's anything else I'd rather listen to in the metal world than Tool Undertow.
And is this the Tool that has I can't remember the song, but it's about addiction or sober, right? Is this
one of the coolest videos? Yeah, this is that record. Yeah, this was their debut 1993 record. Yeah. And
I mean, that was an incredibly sensitive song to people suffering or who are currently in recovery. I thought that was a very mature, maybe one of the most mature heavy metal albums we've had in a while.
Oh yeah, and it still holds today. And like that, it's hard when your first record is such a masterpiece to kind of keep going and seeing how great can you get. And Tool fortunately stayed just as good, and they never fell down to a level of like, but they stayed so great. So for me, the first album, the one that hit me the hardest because I was a kid and like this is the first I heard of them, it never gets old. So.
Mm-hmm. And what movies are you looking forward to seeing, in the remainder of this year of 2021? What movies are getting you excited?
We talked about this, and it's great because I'm sort of at a tie. Normally, anytime there's a Wes Anderson movie coming out, that's the thing I'm looking forward to the most out of the year. But because One Night in Soho is also coming out this year and looks so great,
yes,
those two are just a direct tie for me. Like, and also Scott Cooper's Antlers is finally coming out. That's like a year and a half delayed. And it's Scott Cooper finally doing like a horror movie, and I think it looks insane. It's coming out in the middle of October. It's like finally they're releasing some Halloween movies during October.
Yeah. And can you please tell me about a film or any films that changed your life, or just one that is a favorite of yours?
Such an awesome question. This is weird. It's hard to explain. There's this weird life timeline that I have with the late, great Tony Scott, the director. His films seem to kind of like run parallel to like my interests as they started to change and I started to grow up. Like Top Gun was the film that made me want to pursue filmmaking. It made everybody else want to be a pilot. It made me want to be the person that makes that movie. Beverly Hills Cop 2 was the first R-rated movie I snuck into. I think I was like 10 years old. And I was like, wow, look at this action. It's so crazy. True Romance, at the time, that was right at the time I discovered like independent films, and I was getting to that age where I could watch more things kind of and look at them from like an adult perspective. QT script and Tony Scott's direction blew me away. Crimson Tide came out, and that was what everybody loved in high school. We just loved that movie.
Yeah.
Could that have influenced me a little bit in my decision to join the Navy? Maybe, because it seemed so cool. Yeah, Man on Fire was the one that kind of hit me as an adult and spoke to me with there's lots of destruction and lots of death and violence, but there's such a great bond between a man and a little girl, and there's so much heart in that. Like, so I just feel like Tony Scott's career, and then God, when he passed away in 2012, I felt like a little bit of me died, because I always got to live my life through when I always remembered when a Tony Scott movie came out and where I was in life when that happened. And yeah, I felt just something, a little missing piece, because there's no more Tony Scott movies, so that's I mean, your question was more about if there's a single movie that did it, but I feel like it was him as a director, and his movies are what kind of did it. So sort of the same thing.
That's very interesting. And well, I feel like you've answered the next question as to what or who are some of your favorite directors and why they are your favorites. So I kind of feel like you did kind of answer that question. And
I got a few more.
Oh, good. Please share with us.
I have a strange list of directors. They're kind of all over the place. I think working today, Catherine Bigelow is my favorite director. She directed my favorite film, Strange Days, and continues to just be a master at every single thing she does. Let's see, who else do we have? Oh, I talked about Tom DeSillo movies. I love slice of life movies. Go see Living in Oblivion if you haven't seen it. Brad Anderson is this very under the radar horror. Well, he's not just horror, very suspenseful director. He did a lot of things like The Wire and television, really great, gritty television. But he directed Session 9, The Machinist, Trans-Siberian from 2009. And also the other person now I love is Alex Garland. I thought that Annihilation was a masterpiece in my opinion. And,
right.
And lastly, another slice of life guy who takes on his last two movies I was not a fan of, but Alexander Payne has made some of my favorite movies. Sideways, Election, and my favorite movie of 2011, The Descendants. I just love him as a director, but I didn't like his last two movies that much, but that's okay.
Descendants was a very interesting film, and I think it did get a lot of buzz when it came out, but I just like the relationships in that film. For me, I felt like it was kind of like telling a family story, but from a different side of the family, or a different approach, and I think it made it very appealing, and it almost presented itself as a mystery story, and I really liked that. So it was an excellent film. I loved it. Yeah. And is there anything else that you would like the PGS viewers to know about you?
To know about me? God, now I'm going to have to take my time on this one. Okay, we talked about records. We talked about movies. I love dogs, but that's boring. I got one. So here's what you can. Here's something about me that I don't really show anybody because it's so old. But my first film, I put it on DVD a long time ago.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's like I made my own jacket.
Right.
And,
wow, that's fantastic. What is the name of the film?
It's called Washed Off. And it's about a guy who loses his family, not to death, but they leave him, and he wants to kill somebody. So he tries to find someone who looks like his wife to murder. And I remember when I showed this and it was screened, people were like, that's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't want to do that. I just want to tell that story. Like, it's just a story. Like, that's what writing's all about. It's like telling a story. But no, it's funny because like it was a fun like 5-day shoot, and I got to shoot inside this bar, which was really cool. Like, so it looked like we had money spent. But that was my first film that had a beginning, middle, end, credits, actors, DPs, sound people. It was fun.
Now, is it on your website? Is it viewable or?
It's not yet. I had it on, and I took it off because it's standard 4:3, and I really want to get it converted before I put it on. Even though the 4:3 does kind of make it look grittier because it was shot on film. This inside is the actual film of that movie.
Oh wow! Yeah. Oh wow!
Yeah, I got it telesemi to mini DV tape and then edited it on Avid, but yeah, I do want to put it back on. I just want to convert it first, so and maybe redo the sound mix because it's one of those things where you make a DVD off of like a mini DV tape in 2000 something. And then when you watch it now, you're like, oh, you know, but yeah.
Yeah, I
No
remember
4K version of Washed Off coming out anytime soon.
I remember those mini DV tapes, and like I had a Canon camera, you know, like just one of the many that use mini DV, and it was kind of like what we used, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that there were a lot of TV shows that were using that format too for a while. So you know,
I saw bags of them. I saw bags of mini DV tapes.
Yeah, and you know, just there, you know, one of these days, for me, the biggest thing was I don't have that Canon camera anymore, so I don't know how I'm even going to watch these DV tapes. But you know,
I actually have a DSR-11, which was the deck that played 3 different size tapes. I still have one of those in my closet. I just need to hook it up.
That's a fantastic camera that it could accommodate so many different types of tape, but you know, and also other things like you could plug it in and use it as a player, and you could record on it from the television. I mean, when I say plug in, I mean into a video source, and you could record on it, you could play it, you could do input output on it. I mean, it was that's a great camera. I always wanted one of those.
Yeah. That's how you have to see most of my stuff.
Well, it sounds very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how your film comes out, your documentaries, and everything. And once again, guys, you need to go to Cinema Gulp on YouTube and subscribe to Ben's channel, please, guys. Come on, this whole thing is about supporting one another, and I just wanted to thank you, Ben, for joining me today on PGS All Stars.
No, thank you so much. This was absolute pleasure. And it's always a pleasure talking to you. So thank you so much. I was honored. I was honored to be asked.
And we definitely want to have you back if you're available to join us again in the future, which I hope you are.
Anytime.
And with that, take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us for PGS All Stars today. And remember, be kind to each other. Bye-bye.